Welcome to the Pzaz Filmmaker interview series. At Pzaz, we've made it our mission to help film and video makers succeed. In this series, we'll be speaking to interesting people from across the film industry. We'll gain insight into their journeys to help share their lessons with our audience.
Today's guest is American writer, producer, and director Lindsey Paulette. Lindsey hails from Richmond, Virginia, in the United States, and has been performing for the stage and screen since the age of 7. She first studied film at John Tyler Community College and then at Savannah College of Art and Design. She then went on to graduate from Virginia Commonwealth University's cinema program. Since graduating, Lindsey has successfully directed her first feature-length film, which premiered earlier this year. Please enjoy today's wide-ranging conversation with filmmaker Lindsey Paulette. Lindsey, welcome, and thank you very much for joining me for this call. Welcome to the Pzaz video interview series. Thanks very much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, you're very welcome. So, for those people who maybe aren't familiar with you or with your work, do you mind just giving us a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what it is that you do at the moment, please?
Well, I am from Richmond, Virginia, and I am an independent contractor. I work in commercial and advertising, and then I also am an independent filmmaker as well. I do writing, directing, and producing.
Excellent. Okay. What does that split look like for you in terms of your days? Like, how much of your time do you get to spend working on your own projects versus how much do you spend, helping other people with theirs and contracting?
Yeah, well, being a freelancer, it varies month to month, week to week, just because sometimes I'm super slammed and I'm really busy with work, and then other times it's a slower period, and it's during those times that I tend to focus more so on personal projects. It's an interesting balance. Sometimes I feel like wish I was working less, and then there's times where I'm like, man, I really wish someone would call me so that I could have a job. But in those moments, I do try to really embrace the fact that when I am working, I have like no free time at all. And so in those slower periods, like, okay, this is the time, we shouldn't be dwelling. We should be working on our independent stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm lucky if when I'm working, I also get to be working on my personal stuff on the side, just because you lose that momentum, especially when you're working with other people. It's tough to not be in constant communication when you're on another job. So I try to, at the very least, keep up with my emails when I'm working in commercial.
It must be quite difficult to have those periods where everything comes at once, I suppose, or you don't have enough hours in the day. What's that like when you're at the peak of a project?
I mean, I personally really enjoy it. I have a hard time sitting still and relaxing, so I feel like I constantly have to be working on something, whether it's this paid commercial work or it's throwing myself into another personal project because I don't feel like I have enough going on. Probably not like the best health-wise, but I'm young and I have time and I have energy, so I feel like now is the time to do it, and maybe I'll slow down once I would love to blend my personal career with the professional, and then I don't have to be taking as much commercial gigs, and I can be paid to do the narrative work, which is, I'm sure, most people's goal. But for right now, I'm always just happy to have a job.
Yeah. Do you sort of see a plan for how those two things might come together over time? Like, do you have like a long-term sort of strategy laid out for how you might move more to the stuff that's more personal?
Yeah, it's a tough thing because I feel like this is one of those industries where the path to success is not super clear, like on what I should be doing next. Right now, I mean, I have a lot of projects under my belt, and the plan has always been to just kind of continue to build the portfolio and, prove that I might be a young director, but I'm a competent director, and then maybe one day someone will pay me for that. But I've been producing my own projects for 6 years now, with my first feature being released earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on, it's in the festival circuit right now, but we're hoping to do distribution after festivals. So hopefully that will produce some income. Mm-hmm. And then we're also in development for the next feature, and this time we're hoping to get some of that money more so up front. And so between my directing portfolio and my writing portfolio, I'm hoping that I can do one or both of those things full time.
Yeah. Do you have a preference for one of those? Like, do you have a particular discipline that you'd say you love working on the most, or is it a bit of a balance?
Yeah, it is tough because I really, really do enjoy writing. I've obviously been doing that longer because I've been able to access writing for longer. I started in stage, so I've been writing plays since I was a young child and transitioned into film. And I really love that. It is such a solo process, though, and one of my favorite things about directing is the collaboration. So I don't know that I'd be able to do one or the other because I feel like I need that balance of being able to work by myself, flesh out these stories, like be creative as an individual, but then eventually bringing people into that process and working with actors and working with the crew to like fully visualize everything.
I was really impressed because I think I read that you started performing on the stage when you were about 7 years old. Is that right? That's when you first got the theatre bug.
Yeah, I had a lot more confidence and enthusiasm as a child. That I was very out there, had a lot of energy, and my mom didn't know what to do with all of that, so she signed me up for some theater classes. And for about 7 years, that was like a goal of mine. I was like, oh, I'm gonna be an actor. I'm gonna be an actor. And then I hit puberty, and then I got some stage fright. And then I was like, oh, actually, I don't think I want to do this. I don't know that I like all this attention. It just, I don't know what really, I can't really fully explain that transition, like what that shift, like where that came from. But it was all of a sudden, I was like, I don't really want to act anymore. Like, I still love acting as like a concept.
Yeah.
And I consider myself an actor's director just because that was what my background was. And I can sympathize with being an actor. I don't want to do it, and I will every once in a while be an extra or like say a line or two for a friend who had an actor drop out last minute. It takes a lot of like coercion on their part, so it's not something that I do very willingly.
Yeah, it must be. I always think that to be an actor and then to transition to being behind the camera, I think it must make you a better writer or director because you've got more empathy for what the actors and actresses are having to do on the other side, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, you definitely don't think of them as talking props like some people do.
Yeah.
Because when you've been there before, you understand like the anxiety of being in front of a large group of people. And like, honestly, even more so, I would rather do live audience than a camera. There's something about having a camera shoved in my face that was way more nerve wracking than being in front of an audience. You know, the lights are on, you can't really see them. But then like the learning the lines and making sure that you're portraying the characters accurately. Like, you know, I've had directors that screamed at me when I was little, and it's just like all of that experience, like it makes you want to be better and treat people like people and not just like these people that are working for you and serving your vision. Like, it's very collaborative.
Yeah, that must be a lot to handle potentially. So I can see why, in a sense, it might feel more comfortable to sort of be behind the camera and be able to take that role for sure. Yeah. So it looks like you had quite a varied education. You know, sort of from going to community college and then learning about filmmaking at the College of Art and Design, and then going to Virginia Commonwealth University to the cinema program. That must have been really interesting. Do you feel you learned a lot from those institutions? And would you recommend someone sort of follows that same pathway if they want to become a filmmaker?
I definitely am not someone that thinks that film school is necessary, especially with the technology that we have access to now. And each program was very different. I went to community college because I had applied to VCU actually, and I did not get in.
Right.
But I was a really good student all through high school. I was in like the top 1% of my class. So it was kind of the expectation that I was going to be going to college. I only applied to that one school for that one program. Um, well, I think, I got into VCU. I did not get into their cinema program because I was considered going for psychology after I got rejected from the film program. But I thought about it and I was like, I'm going to do psychology. I was going to do that just so that I could go to that school.
Right.
And then I decided, okay, well, never mind. My local community college had a film program. I never really looked into it, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to school. They had a career certificate that was just a year. And I was like, if I feel like I'm good after that, I can just walk away with the certificate and be done with school. I ended up really enjoying the program. So I stayed to get my associates. And then I transferred to SCAD. Again, that was the only school I had applied to. I was kind of like, if I don't get into this program, then I'm just going to join the workforce. I did get in. I went for 2 semesters. I didn't get to fully get into my major because I had to repeat some classes just because they did not accept some of my credits, which was very frustrating, but it was some of my intro credits. So I had to take English again, which was crazy.
Right. It seems weird, really. Yeah. Seems like a strange thing to have to reset. Yeah.
Yeah. And then COVID hit. And I couldn't bring myself to pay for studio prices to take an online class.
Right.
So I'm from Richmond. So when COVID hit and everything was online, I took a semester off and thought about it. I found out they weren't going to be going back in person again for the next semester. So I applied to VCU again, and this time I got in, and I finished out my degree at VCU.
Right. So I think for many people, sort of a similar age, COVID has had such a massive impact on maybe their education, on maybe their ability to find work, in the aftermath. It seems like you've had to, sort of roll with the punches a little bit, and you've had to kind of react to these situations. Like, can you think of any advice that you give to people who are maybe about to pick a course now or are in the midst of trying to get their qualifications? Like, what would you say to them if they're finding it difficult, or maybe they don't know which way to go?
Yeah, I mean, I just spoke to some students the other day at my old high school. Actually, I had a counselor who knew about my degree reach out and ask me if I'd be willing to come in and speak to some juniors that are getting ready to do college applications.
Right.
And I told them, I'm like, if you want to do school, I think that's great. I think it's a great place to meet people. I don't know if, depending on the program that you do, if you're going to get necessarily like the skills that you want out of it, like the technical training, especially as we're still transitioning out of COVID. I feel like that's been a really hard thing for a lot of these programs. But what made my time in school worth it was the people that I met and making the most of the time and the resources, even if they were limited, and just making projects while we were there, getting to know people, getting to figure out where everybody fit within a crew. And then I've been out of school for a little over 2 years now. And those, even on these professional sets that I work on, those are the people that I still work with. When I finally moved into a position where I was able to do some hiring within these programs, the first people I reached out to were people I went to school with. So it's definitely, no matter where you end up, if it's school or if it's like PAing on a random set, like utilizing the people and getting to know the people, not just professionally, but like on a personal level, because people really value you caring about them as a person.
Yeah.
And not just like in your department either. I don't do G&E, I don't do camera, but some of my favorite people on set are the G&E camera guys, because they're the first people to ask me, hey, how are you? They remember our past conversations, and like we can build a relationship. And it's like, you never know who's going to recommend you for a job. Like, they might not be hiring me in their department, but they might be like, hey, do you know someone that works in coordination? And they'll be like, yeah, actually, I work with this really cool person. So it's all about networking, really. College is expensive networking, but it's a good, I don't regret going to school. I don't think everybody needs to do it, but I definitely don't regret doing it myself.
It makes me wonder, like, someone probably could make that many connections and build those relationships with people in a different way. But like you say, college certainly seems like a really good way to do that. Maybe it's not the only way, or and maybe it is quite expensive, but it definitely seems to give people those networks and those relationships, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the easier way. It's more expensive, but it's definitely, you have a built-in group of people that you meet on your first day.
Mm.
Whereas when you go straight into set, I'm 25 and I walk on set, and most of the time I'm the youngest person there. So it's like, and I don't care. I have no issue talking to people that are like 5, 10, 30 years older than me. I don't care. But sometimes it takes a second for them to feel comfortable talking to me. Like they don't know where I stand. So, but I mean, now it took me like 5 months of working with the same crews over and over again for people of all ages and experience levels to feel comfortable speaking to me. So it's possible.
That's interesting. So if I was about to kind of go into a crew and it was my first project, and maybe I was like you, I maybe didn't know as many people, or I wasn't as old as other people, what advice would you give me in how to succeed in that environment? Or what should I be thinking? What should I be keeping in mind to do in those first few days?
I would just be friendly and introduce yourself when you can. And then don't be in the way, but be available and like insight. That is something that I still struggle with. Sometimes I'm not the most like pushy and assertive person, and I work in several different departments, and I'm so worried about being in people's way that sometimes I end up not being able to like I work in hair and makeup sometimes. You got to push through a whole crowd of people to do your touch-ups.
Right.
And I've had people get upset with me because they're like, oh, well, I'm trying to light this, or, oh, we're trying to set this. And it's like, okay, but if I don't come in here and do my job, I'm not going to get a chance to do my job because no one's calling for last looks most of the time, unfortunately. So kind of figuring out when is the best time to stay to the side for a second versus pushing your way through the crowd it's a hard skill to learn, and I still struggle with it. But so when you're first there, I feel like it's a good idea to kind of just stay on the edge and get a feel for the dynamic between the crew and figure out where and when is the best time for you to take your turn. But yeah, and being willing to help out, especially if you're PAing. You never know what you're going to do when you're PAing. Just like be willing to help out wherever you can, but then also not touching people's stuff. I mean, there's so many unspoken rules on a film that you kind of just have to either mess up yourself or watch somebody else mess it up. I have seen that before too, where I've seen when I was PAing, I saw many a fellow PA get yelled at for overstepping.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, I feel really bad, but at least I know now that I'm not supposed to do that. Just watch someone else do it. So yeah, just being friendly and observant are the top two things. You pick stuff up quickly. Eventually, people will just start to get used to you being there, and it'll be a normal thing.
It's there are books I've read, funnily enough, not on filmmaking or on that industry at all, but more general, where the advice is, just watch, listen, and learn. And don't necessarily, because you're the new person, you don't have to impress everyone straight away by being the most knowledgeable or having the most skills. A lot of the time, what really works is just keeping your eyes open and watching what's happening and trying to understand everything that's happening around you before you go maybe diving into a situation and trying to impress people with how good you are or how much you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think that's the case. I had many people, both professionally and socially, tell me that when they first met me, they thought I was really shy because I don't speak much when I'm like in a new environment, in a new group. And it's because I'm paying attention. I'm trying to get a feel for the different personalities, the dynamic of that existing group, and figuring out where I best fit into that before I just start running my mouth. But once I'm comfortable, then I get a little annoying sometimes. And so people are always surprised later. They're like, when I first met you, I didn't think you were like, very talkative at all. And it's like, I was paying attention first. I wanted to make sure that you were someone I wanted to talk to.
Yeah. That makes sense. Someone I interviewed recently, they said that one of their biggest regrets after film school was not experimenting more with different cameras, different techniques, different types of filming. Did you find that at all, or can you empathize with that regret, or did that not really apply so much for you?
Um, I feel like the kind of filmmaking that I do has remained pretty standard for at least like as long as I've been doing, which is only 6 years, so that could change.
Yeah.
But like my style and the kind of stories I want to tell have always stayed kind of the same. And if we ever kind of shifted from that, it was usually because of the team I was working with and like stuff that they wanted to explore. So I do pretty straightforward narrative. Um, as I started getting a little bit more into music videos, I've gotten a little bit more experimental because I feel like you have the space to be more experimental in a music video. But I don't know, the program I was in was always very like narrative focused. So we didn't do a ton of experimentation. I mean, everybody had a style and you could kind of see the differences, but I don't think so. I'm not the best camera person. I have like two cameras that I am comfortable operating, and then anything that strays from that, someone else cannot operate it. It's definitely not for me. But I did camera operate for 2 years just to learn how to do it, so I could communicate with DPs. But it definitely wasn't like me moving towards a career or anything. I knew I didn't want to work in the camera department.
Right.
A learning thing.
Right. I see. Okay. The other thing I was told recently, I was given advice about being a filmmaker, and it's to make lots of mistakes because learning, you tend to learn a lot from the mistakes that you make. At least that's what this person thought. And I wondered, what do you think about that? Are there any mistakes that you've made that taught you a lot, or that particularly stick in the memory?
For sure, I've made tons of mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I don't know if there's anything in particular that stands out. It's more so like I'll go back and watch old projects that I've either creatively led or even just worked on and been like, knowing what I know now, we didn't need to do it like that. Or just being a little embarrassed by the quality of stuff and then trying to remember. It's like, yeah, that was the second film I ever made. So yeah, it was a little rough around the edges, and I agreed to work on a lot of projects that sometimes I'm like, that was a pretty big waste of my time. But then even then I'm like immediately like, oh, well, no, because even though I wasn't the one making the mistakes on this particular set, I was watching other people make mistakes and, take note of what works, what doesn't. And then you just get to use all of that experience on your own stuff. And my filmography is longer than it is publicly known because there are some things that I just don't talk about. But because of how long that filmography is, I'm like, when I go back and look at the list, because I do keep it, I'm like, that's a lot of lessons learned right here.
Yeah. And it's all I see what you're saying. Maybe in one way you might have looked at it as being a mistake or a waste of time, but in another way, it probably taught you things that you've gone on to use since in some way or another. So it's probably valuable in a different way, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't think that doing anything is ever a mistake. I'm a big believer of that everything happens for a reason, and things happen when they're supposed to happen. So I don't regret doing any of the things I do. Sometimes I will find myself on set and just be like hot and I'm tired and I'm like, I can't believe I agreed to this, I'm underpaid, and I'm like, oh my gosh. But then once all of the negativity fades and you're just left with like the experience and the memories, it's easier to look back and be like, okay, well, that's why I needed to do that so that I could know this and learn this, and maybe you met somebody really cool on that project. Like there's always a reason.
Yeah. If I was just kind of starting out in my role as a filmmaker and I wanted to start building a filmography like you have, what's the number one thing that you'd give me as advice? Or maybe like, how can I stand out from the crowd today when there's, technology makes a lot of things easier than it have been in the past, and there's maybe so many people trying to get into, sort of screenwriting and direction?
I feel like if you need to just You have to stay true to yourself and what you want to make. And I try to not be influenced by what's currently doing well in the media or in the theaters or on streaming services or even on YouTube. I definitely watch a lot of content. So you are going to be subconsciously, influenced by that, whether you want to be or not. So, but I don't think you should take it further than that. Like if you're influenced by something and you don't really realize it and incorporate that into your art, that's cool, but you shouldn't be like actively trying to be like somebody else. And so, and it's tough when especially when money comes involved and you're trying to sell it. That's one of the things I've been worried about now that I've been doing more profitable type stuff. Everybody has an opinion, wants to tell you how to make it more marketable. And that's really solid advice. But when you're first starting and you just want to make stuff and you want to stand out, I think the best way to do that is to make what you want to make and do it the way that you want to, because that's going to be the most unique thing you can do. And then you can worry about being more marketable later.
Yeah. So you've got to be true to who you are and what you want to make. Lindsey, this has been really interesting. I know that people watching this are going to find it like fascinating to hear from someone like you who's already sort of started to strike their own path and has had success. So thank you again for talking to me and for sort of taking the time to tell us about your career. Just before we wrap this up, are there any projects that you'd like to sort of take this opportunity to promote? We can put links in the blog post for this interview to any work or websites that you want us to promote, but is there anything that you want to draw people's attention to particularly?
Yeah, so I mean, my two big things right now are my first feature film, The Trip, is working its way through the festival circuit right now. It's been in a few, and we still have to hear back from many others. Hopefully, we will know where that's going to live post festival. We haven't decided yet. And then aside from that, my producer team and I are in development for my next feature. So not so much to promote on that end, but that is in the works.
Coming soon. Brilliant. That's very exciting. Well, again, thank you very much for your time and for talking to me. And I know people find this really interesting. So thanks again. And have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, you do the same.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye, Lindsey.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed watching today's interview. This video is part of the Filmmaker interview series from Pzaz. At Pzaz, we're building a production ecosystem that helps you to get things done. To try it for free, visit pzaz.io today. Thanks for watching.